Hello, my name is Lori Shantz, and I'm a professor of practice here at the School of Journalism and Communication. I came to the University of Oregon in 2014 after spending 23 years as a full-time professional journalist. I specialized in collegiate sports, women's issues, and the Olympics. When I came here after my job interview, the first thing I did after I checked in at the hotel was walk to Hayward Field. And when I got the job, one of the first things I began working on was getting opportunities for students to cover events there. This is where I need to stress that while covering the winners at the US Olympic trials or the World Athletics Championships is important, that's not the only reason I wanted students at Hayward. I had two more important reasons. The first reason, at their best, sports are about community. I am a journalist and a journalism educator who believes that local journalism is what makes democracy work. That's why I build all of my classes to put students in a position to be curious about the communities they cover. And you simply cannot understand Eugene, Tracktown, USA, without going to Hayward Field. The second reason, covering sports is like getting your dessert and your vegetables at the same time. People pay attention because it's sports. It's fun. And yes, sports can be an escape from the real world. But everything that happens outside the playing field happens on it too. And that gives you the opportunity to write about anything. About race, about class, about gender, comedy, tragedy, humanity. The possibilities are endless. You just need to learn to see them. I learned to do that through the Olympics. I covered the Olympic Games 4 times as a writer, and I organized coverage from 2 more Olympics as an editor. I wrote about Fatuma Roba, the Ethiopian who became the first African woman to win the Olympic marathon. I wrote about Kathy Freeman, who won the 400-meter gold under enormous pressure in her home country at the Sydney Olympics, and about the Aboriginal people who were thrilled to see one of their own succeed. And I also wrote about the athletes who were rarely, if ever, featured on NBC. These were the locals, the athletes who were born in or trained in or competed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I worked. They were relay swimmers and judo players. They were marathoners and cyclists who had spent time in Pittsburgh when the Olympic trials were held there. A wrestler, an archer, each of whom won gold medals. These stories were some of my favorites. And I know from the letters and emails that those stories were favorites among readers as well. I brought all of that experience to Oregon and to Hayward Field. And for 8 years, I taught what came to be known internally as track class and externally as the SOJC Track Bureau. There is nowhere else in the world you can give students opportunities like this. Hayward Field has 2 crucial elements. The first element is obvious. Hayward hosts big-time events with big-time stakes. Conference championships, NCAA championships, USA championships, Olympic trials, world championships. These are the kind of events that students get excited about covering and the kind of events that sports editors want coverage of. The second element is perhaps less obvious, but equally important. Hayward also hosts small, more local events, and that gives students the chance to practice their skills. I cannot stress this enough. The reason my students have had so much success covering the Olympic trials and the World Championships is because they first struggled to cover the Oregon relays and the Hayward Premier and Oregon Twilight. I always teach students that great stories work on 2 levels, the specific and the universal. That idea is applicable here too. At the specific level, these opportunities have prepared students to cover the track and field beat, which is a major part of the job for any Olympics reporter. They've conducted extensive research to write advanced stories and prepare statistical packages. They've done everything at an event, from producing game stories, to moderating interviews, to live tweeting results, to promoting our coverage. And they did it all on a tight deadline. At the universal level, these opportunities have prepared students to cover any community, any beat. They've immersed themselves in the history of track and field in Eugene, focusing on the context that gives stories depth and heart. They've developed contacts and sources. And meet organizers and public relations professionals have gone out of their way to give my students a peek behind the scenes, the kind of knowledge that makes great journalism. As I wrote on my syllabus, you will leave this class knowing how to think like a journalist, a skill you'll be able to transfer to any beater story, whether you're covering high school sports, the Olympics, education policy, environmental issues, Eugene City Council, or the White House. Students did not just show up and cover the meets either. Eugene, Oregon has a critical mass of track and field athletes and experts, and they have been generous to my students and to me. We had a sprint coach come to class and literally get into the blocks to show them how to do a start. We had throwers explain the physics of the javelin. Distance runners came and watched film of the races with us to break down their strategy. Just as I learned to cover the Olympics by following a New York Times reporter through the mix zone, my students have learned to flag down athletes and ask good questions as they work side by side with reporters from literally around the world. And my students have produced. They have written, and I have edited, 863 deadline stories. We have also provided freelance coverage for 40 professional outlets. That includes small daily outlets ranging from The Sun in Lewiston, Maine, to The Sentinel in Santa Cruz, California. It includes major metros like the Oregonian, the Houston Chronicle, and the Tampa Bay Times. It includes track and field specific publications like Runner's World. And it includes international outlets such as Athletics Africa and the World Athletics website. And when we needed to, we adjusted. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, we partnered with Tracktown USA and the organizing committee to staff their virtual mix zone, which kept athletes safe and allowed journalists to get the quotes they needed from their pieces. There is a story behind every one of these stories, and I could talk about them all day, but I'll leave you with one of my favorites. Alex was a senior broadcast major who was writing for the Yankton, South Dakota paper at the 2018 NCAA championships, covering the local athletes who were competing in the pole vault. That is an event that goes on forever. So when Chris Nilsson of the University of South Dakota won an NCAA championship, it was just 5 minutes before Alex's deadline. He had to file the story without any quotes, then he had to chase down Nilsson, then he had to do the interview, then he had to write another story. He was flat out exhausted. He was also not super happy with me at that moment. 2 days later, however, Alex found himself on a tight deadline again. He was covering the winner of the men's 800 meters, and that athlete's newspaper was on an East Coast deadline. This time, Alex finished the interview, sat at his computer, and smiled. He was unbelievably relaxed. "This is great," he said. "I've got 45 whole minutes." This was a sentence that was literally impossible to imagine him saying just 2 days before. And that's how the learning happens. Before I go, I'd like to highlight the best part of having student journalists at Hayward, the way each group has become a team. There are about 40 events in the typical weekend track meet. That is a long time to spend at Hayward Field, where it's often raining, windy, hailing, sunny, or hot. Sometimes all that happens during the same meet. So everyone got to know each other much better than they did in any other class or any other experience. And with so many events, there was no need to compete for stories. They were able to get to know each other and help each other. Not long ago, I was working as a freelancer myself, covering the Oregon State High School Track and Field Championships. I arrived at Hayward, and I found that 5 of my former students were covering the event too. All of them were working for different outlets scattered across the state of Oregon. All of them had graduated in different years, and all of them were hanging out, all their background research I taught them how to do, and helping each other. It's yet another example. At their best, sports build community, and so does journalism. Thank you.